Good morning, everyone, on this early Friday morning, to those here on the spot and those hopefully watching online. If not, we're going to make little clips after and share it. But I'm glad that here in the framework of the Riga conference, which is the largest forum for discussions on security policy and the safety of our region, that also the topic of protection of cultural heritage is included. And actually, last night, one of the special conversations was on the role of art and culture in raising Ukraine's voice currently internationally. And that was a very moving conversation, which just yet again, I think, reaffirm that culture is the foundation of our identity, and through that also the foundation of our security. So these are not just words. I think they call for action, and we've seen recently, not only in the context of Ukraine, but also globally, the kind of rising of prominence of this question. Last week, I was at a conference on global cultural policy called Mondiacult, that took place in Barcelona, and it is a UNESCO format. And there we saw that culture is included, obviously, in national development plans. But when we talk about crisis preparedness of the cultural sector, and the protection of cultural heritage, tangible, intangible, digital, physical, in times of crises, in times of climate change, in times of development of new technologies, there is still a lot to be done. And is having plans enough? Is having culture in development plans enough? So obviously, several European countries, building on this vision that culture heritage needs to be integrated into disaster preparedness, crisis management, post-crisis recovery plans. We see that European countries take concrete steps to introduce culture in their national security plans. Strategies, concepts, and culture is included in these plans in Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, Spain, the United Kingdom, Finland, Norway, and Ukraine. And Norway's white paper on defense says that culture is a rock-solid pillar that binds people together. So it's about cooperation. It's about recognizing this as an integral part of these plans. And I'm proud to say that also Latvia has this year launched a national plan for safeguarding cultural heritage that includes mainly practical aspects. It strengthens the legal framework to clarify the responsibilities of cultural property owners. It ensures secure storage and accessibility of critical data, mapping and prioritizing heritage assets for effective planning. There are elements that establish a permanent interinstitutional group for crisis management, protection, and rescue. So we cooperate with the Ministry of Defense, the Fire and Rescue Service, the National Armed Forces, and not only through conversation, but through joint training, simulation exercises, and knowledge sharing. And we're also working to join the second protocol of the Hague Convention on protection of cultural heritage in times of military conflict. So we're doing the homework, and I think there are many things that we can be proud of. But I think that this conversation today is both about the more practical steps, but also the rationale. Why is this important? Why is it important that we include protection of cultural heritage in our security strategies, in our planning? And I'm happy to be joined here by two partners, I think, of Latvia in the context of how can we improve the approach to protecting cultural heritage here in Latvia. And it's Dr. Frederick Rosen, who's the director of the Nordic Center for Cultural Heritage and Armed Conflict in Copenhagen, and also Colonel Xavi Walsh, who's a representative of the Canadian Armed Forces currently here in Latvia. And I'm going to start with you, Frederick. What would you say are the most visible examples that demonstrate cultural heritage protection as a not only humanitarian issue, but also as a matter of military strategy?
I mean, First, I can notice that I work with this topic for more than a decade, and I've been running 2 larger projects that aimed at supporting NATO and allied nations with developing their thinking and approaches towards cultural domain issues. And while international humanitarian law and the convention obviously has played a great role in that regard, and the question of due conduct when you are having military operations going, it really has been from the beginning the political issues, the cultural domain issues, so to say, that has been a key issue. And for the first many years, these were the lessons identified that came out of more or less all recent conflicts where allies have participated in, from the Balkan Wars over Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and the coalition against Daesh. In all those operations, cultural heritage has been a major issue for the troops on the ground to navigate in their everyday business. And they didn't really have the proper tools to navigate it. And they didn't speak about it as a matter of cultural heritage. I mean, the language that we're using when we speak about the 1954 Hague Convention and the broader UNESCO agenda, it was much more practical. I mean, about the difficulties that you will face as a commander if you, by accident, harmed a culturally important site somewhere in Baghdad. And the weeks or months that it would impose, difficulties you in terms of remedying the situation and bridging the relationship to the locals instead. So now we have an entirely different situation, because we are moving to inner operations. We are facing hostilities ongoing, as well as threats of not only forced escalation, but also a continuous pressure on the space that we call culture. Our fundamental narratives about who are people, how are the communities, where do they belong, and what are the borders? What is the relationship between peoples, the borders, and that places cultural and cultural heritage at the very heart of the conflicts that we are facing today. And obviously we see a lot of destruction in Ukraine at the moment that really has kind of made this topic rise higher on the agenda. But simultaneously, those physical destructions are accompanied with an incessant stream of what we call information warfare in the cognitive domain, hybrid attacks on our values, our norms, and our ideas about who owns the land and how is this ownership anchored in our notions of cultural property. So I would say that the old dictum, divide and rule, actually only makes sense if this concept of divide is about cultural and cultural coherence. And this is the domain that we really have to scale up our ambitions in today. And I think here Latvia is in a very good position, both with the energy, so to say, that there's a room, because you're not only speaking about memory politics and memory wars here, you have a very present memory of memory wars and politics, which means that you understand what it means to have hostile powers doing all what they can to tear apart the cultural fabric in order to divide your nation, to establish rules. And then you have a very innovative defense planning setup, which is actually doing exactly what we need in order to bridge the sectors. You are bringing everybody into the room for a joint conversation about how you're tackling joint challenges. So,
thank you. I think that really observing the destruction across the world, we see that cultural property is also, purposely targeted. It is deliberately included in many of the activities, and so that means that our preparedness and our planning need to be on par as well. And here I want to turn to Colonel Walsh, and actually, I think it would be useful to explain why is a legal officer here with the Canadian Armed Forces and not just the guys training? And why, how is cultural property included in this planning and the work that you do?
Great, Labdian. Thank you very much. It's great to be here on this stage and great to be in Latvia. So my name is Lieutenant Colonel Chavi Walsh. So I'm a legal officer, or a JAG, with the Canadian Armed Forces. And so our job is basically to advise the Canadian commander. So Canada has the framework nation here as a multinational brigade here in Latvia. And so I advise that commander on basically all issues dealing with the law of armed conflict, international humanitarian law, which involves both planning in peacetime and in conflict. I have two other legal officers here with me in Latvia deployed, and then I also support the mission in the Ukraine. So what we call well, it's basically in Poland right now, but I'm responsible for that as well, where we train the same issues on teaching and training LOAC concepts to Ukrainian officers. So I think for me, in terms of how I got to this position, it was kind of a, the attacks on cultural property really had a personal impact on me and my career choice. So back in 2001, in about March, I was in Canada finishing my undergraduate degree, and the Taliban attacked the giant Buddhas on the Silk Road. And I remember seeing that and thinking, what a loss to humanity. But it was so far away and distant. And then 6 months later, I was in my first day of law school at the University of Ottawa, and it was September 11th, and the Twin Towers were attacked. And I think in both those cases, it was an attack on bricks and stones and mortar, but it was more than that. It was an attack on, the identity of a people, the identity, the way of life of a people. And I think it really had a big impact on me in deciding that, I really needed to get involved and use my law degree somehow to deal with this issue or to address these attacks and these atrocities. But it took a while. I didn't know how. And so I graduated law school. I started working at a sports law firm with NHL players, and it was only until I was advising clients from ex-fighter pilots with the Canadian military who had worked in Libya, Afghanistan, Kosovo, and they told me about these war lawyers that they worked with that basically, before any mission, they basically could hold up a red card and basically stop an attack if the attack was considered to be disproportionate, or the collateral damage would be too high. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting way to practice law. So I kind of traded my suit for combat boots and joined boot camp. And in 2013, I went to Afghanistan, Kabul, with the U.S. Marines, and saw kind of firsthand the scars on a country and a nation, and the direct impact on a people from conflict. And so when this mission came up for, to deter and defend Russian aggression here in the Baltics, I jumped on the opportunity, and it brings me here today, so I'm really proud to be here. So what does a JAG do? So basically, like I said, we're kind of the commander's LOAC, or Law of Armed Conflict, brain. We know all the rules and advise the commander on all stages of planning, so both in peacetime and then in conflict with regards to kind of what's onside, what's offside. But it's also an educational function, so it's not always the first thing that commanders think about in terms of cultural protections. They might know generally as to the basic rule, but it's how you integrate that knowledge into early stages of the planning cycle. And I think that's where the partnerships really come in. So we can help reinforce and amplify the point that it's not just the legal obligation that you will get potentially prosecuted for a war crime if you don't comply. So it's not the hammer approach, it's more the preventative approach. So why is it important to mission success? How does protecting the cultural property of the host nation allow you to keep the reputation intact as being a partner in the rule of law, and winning public opinion, or not losing public opinion, which I think is critical, because if you can't see to be applying the rules and the law and the respect for the cultural property, I think it can have a really direct impact on mission success. And Canada has experience in losing public confidence in armed conflicts where laws of armed conflict were not followed, and once you lose public opinion, basically the mission is over. So I think that's a real point we reinforce too as JAGs. So not technically legal, but we are in that space. And the great thing about JAGs is we have direct access to the commander by law and policy at all times. We're separate from the chain of command. So that's not the same in all militaries, but for the Canadian military, it's they keep a certain degree of independence from the JAGs, from the military chain. So we wear the same uniforms and we wear rank, but we're not ever integrated into the chain of command. So it gives us the ability to have full, frank conversations without fear of career implications, and that can be a hard space to work in, but it's an important space. So I think that's kind of why what we do, and we're here till 2029 at least, Canada. So we're committed to Latvia and the Baltic nations to under NATO to protect and defend Latvia and its cultural properties and heritage. But we're here also to learn. To learn what we don't know. It's a nation. We need to work with the civilian partners, things like Blue Shield, UNESCO, the host nation, the Ministry of Culture, to understand what are the important cultural pieces here, so we can integrate those into inventories, plannings, GPS maps. It's all the laws you have are not effective without knowledge, and that comes from partnerships, being here for conversations like today, and continuing that and building off that.
Thank you for that. And obviously, we're all very appreciative and thankful for the partnership with Canada. And I happened to be in Toronto this summer, and the news popped up on the subway kind of screen saying that Canada is extending its presence here for another 3 years. And it was a really special feeling. And I think all of us appreciate this partnership. And I also know that yesterday you had some conversations also with practitioners here. And one of the themes was that protecting cultural heritage isn't protecting something, it's protecting somebody. And that's what we're all doing, right? We're trying to figure out ways how to better protect our people, our nations. And if you could reflect on both the way that NATO could better include this in their strategies, some of the efforts that have already been in place, and some of the language that is used so that it would be better kind of cross-cutting across sectors, that for us working in the Ministry of Culture and working in with cultural institutions, how can we make this bridge between these strategies more efficient?
Thank you. Yeah, it keeps actually puzzling me why we are having those conversations about why culture matters in conflicts, because it's so obvious that it really sits at the core. So it's very much, as I see it, a sectoral divide. I mean, the struggle from the cultural sectors with the mapping onto the defense and security sectors, and the other way around. And so a lot of the work that has been doing in and around those NATO projects has really been about translating concepts, ideas from culture sector work into a way that could fit into doctrinal language, then combined with a number of very practical lessons identified from the field, where you're actually having conversation with persons who already served and experienced in their everyday life the challenges that they faced. So, and it is a very cross-cutting thing, and that is also one of the Latvia is working with the second protocol at the moment, and I guess you have 4 ministries in the room to tackle that, right? In Denmark, we have 5. It's a lot, and there's a lot of different languages, a lot of different portfolios, a lot of different budgets and outlooks and priorities that you have to kind of get into the same work stream, right? And I think that that challenges are, I wouldn't say multiplied, but they are even more there when you are kind of starting to introduce such a topic in a defense organization, because you have all the branches that needs to work together in order to make things happen, from intelligence to the tech staff who's doing the maps, to the engineers, to the planners, so on and so forth, right? So you actually have to do a translating exercise in order to make all those different branches understand what we talk about when we talk about cultural heritage. And then you have to write up documents that everybody agrees on and think that this would be valuable for them, because it's all about creating additional value. So the documents that have been produced, both between the operational commands in NATO, has tried to do this, and they have tried to. One of the tricky things with working with this topic in the NATO context is that because of you lack kind of a real policy on it, you have to go what is already there, and that is laws of armed conflict. So it has mainly been a legal issue formally. But then again, the real problems that are boiling up and that the leadership wants to address is really political. It's hybrid issues. It's things that are kind of happening around in the social space around these places. And for instance, the text that has been developed in collaboration between the two strategic commands are incorporating this language. So there's a lot of I would say cross-cutting work that has gone into these document, and where you actually can find text that will be very useful for bringing forward also the work with the second protocol. And then you have very, also practical guidelines in terms of lower level doctrines that is setting out, best practice for how you build base camps during a military operation. Because in Afghanistan, it was a real issue, because it was a military operation, but it was an enormous infrastructure building project. I mean, not only, base camps and installation for the international forces, but also supporting the Afghan security forces with building their training facilities and infrastructure. It was about bulldozers and moving earth, And there were, unfortunately, a lot of examples where you actually had put bases just on top of areas that kind of would enjoy protection. So these experiences, and these, errors are, finding, are giving ground to trying to find solutions so this will not happen again. And you have doctrines that are now kind of governing this area. So, but it's all scattered because in the lack of an overall policy. So when you are starting to work also, as you say, the second protocol is a very important legal document, and it's really a kind of a new convention in and of itself, but it's also open for the community of interest that has formed internationally around finding out ways to navigate the issue of culture and cultural property, cultural heritage. Those concepts are used interchangeably in international law, so we can swap between them. But there's so much work going on in order to find practical ways of going about it, but it's scattered. The same as the documents in NATO. So you have to dig into this community and find what is there. And I think that when you're doing this, it would be a really important role, I think, to take on to try to get an overview, to get all the right people in the room and take stock of what has already been done, what is in it for you, and how can what is already there support the Latvian and the Baltic project with bringing this forward, and at the same time this would feed back into the community, and you would support the relations who are there, because as you say, it's not about things, it's about bodies, and international security and defense operations, it's also about human relations.
Right. When we first started working on this crisis plan here, also on the national level, I think the first meetings in the same room with people from the State Rescue and Fire Service and the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Interior, everyone was maybe a little cautious. How is this conversation going to go? But what we see now is actually recently we had an internal meeting in the Ministry of Culture regarding what are some of the next steps, and we had people from these other institutions join and say what they've gained from the training and what they see could be the possible future trainings. So actually, in our just regular workday planning, we've established now a good working relationship, and I guess that's what you also do, Lieutenant Colonel Walsh, regarding the planning stage and training stage. And if you could talk a little bit more about how you cooperate with various other institutions, agencies, what is it on the practical level, how protection of cultural property is integrated?
Great. Paldies, Minister. I think it's, it's really important that inter-cooperation, it really plants the seed of how important this topic is, and you think about things that you didn't think about before and how it fits into your daily work. And I think that's why the conversations are important, because they really start generating a lot of questions, and it does spark a lot of interest. I think people are inherently very interested in this this subject, because it's really the reason we do this work is for these humanitarian principles, and it is an issue to all humankind. So how we do it practically. So we plant those seeds early at basic training. So every soldier gets, at first, it starts with knowledge. So what are the general laws of armed conflict? How do they apply to the soldier on the ground? In terms of, so it's an education which builds a degree of respect for areas where they may be operating. And it also then, it translates into what we have is called a code of conduct. So basically 10 simple rules that all soldiers have to follow. And one of those is to protect and respect cultural property in times of armed conflict. So those are, simple. We have produced kind of a little booklet on law of armed conflict that we now issue. It's new this year. So again, it just tries to simplify these concepts, but bring them to the front of soldiers' mind in the training, so at the very basic level. And we do build in this aspect of discipline as well. So not only must you do it for the altruistic reasons, but it is breaches of armed conflict can result in disciplinary charges. And I think that's important because we need accountability here as well. An undisciplined military force can actually do more damage than the enemy. So that's always a theme that runs through our work. Beyond that training, we get more advanced training, and again, plant those seeds and nurture them as officers get to more of the senior ranks, captains, majors, where they'll be involved in planning. So they get more advanced training on the law of armed conflict, including on cultural property protections, the Hague Conventions, AP2, which has some unique parts of the treaty in which there are certain decisions that cannot be taken by lower levels of command. They must be taken kind of at the brigade level or the battalion level. And it's just without the knowledge, it's very easy to violate some of these obligations. And I think that's a big part of our job, like I said, again, education, training. And then we spread that to allies as well. So here in Latvia, we're working with GHQ, so they're our military partners, and their legal side to train them on some of our best practices. They're implementing our 10 rules code of conduct, and so that's new. We're just starting that in November. So being here, it generates ideas and initiatives, and I think that's really helpful. And then we're also, of course, training in Op Unify, or the Ukrainian forces who are coming out of the field, seeing kind of the real damages of conflict on their country, and then trying to train them on the importance of these rules. It's a very tough training audience, but again, it's critical because we have to keep on emphasizing that the conflict is more than just the here and now. It's how do we rebuild after, and it's not always going to get the reception we want, but it is important work, and so we take the training seriously. In planning, like I said, the JAG's roles and plans, op plans, starts in kind of peacetime. Militaries will only really do what they're ordered to do. and if they're not ordered, to think about and be aware of cultural property protections. Again, it's not something intuitive, and we see this in the past from the Iraq wars and conflicts, and where it's just not, if it's not built into the op plan, the military just doesn't know what it doesn't know, and will be so mission focused that through negligence or inadvertence, as opposed to willful destruction, you can have the same result, which is the loss of these properties and protections. So really important that we get involved in the early order planning stage. Then you have to identify, so mission specific. So when you get to a certain area, we don't know. So we need, again, like I said at the outset, to work with host nation, Blue Shield, UNESCO, to identify inventories and use those to build into kind of specific implemented military tools and tasks, like no strike lists, so for targeting. So we'll plug in the GPS coordinates right into geographical mapping software that targeters use. So when a target pops up, and if it's got a GPS tag on it, the targeters will stop, and it will trigger the conversations, and then we can come in and give the advice to the commanders as to the proper balance, according to LOAC, for how we should proceed. So I think that's important. And that's mostly in the training world. And like I said, on the advice side, so after we move from kind of planning into now we're in the conflict, the JAGs, like I said before, have direct access to the commanders, and we give kind of real-time, independent, objective, unencumbered advice to the commander, which is basically the cardinal rule of you do not attack cultural property, you do not damage it, you must protect it. You can't use it so that it becomes a military objective. And there is, a proportionality assessment that has to be done to ensure that if by whatever means the enemy is using it, or the military must use it, there's a very strict kind of military necessity test. And it's not military convenience, it's military necessity. And that's sometimes hard advice to give, and that's why it's so important that the legal advisors have these structural safeguards like independence. And like I said, what I mean by that is, I think it's very important that the legal advisor is detached from the chain of command so they can give that advice that sometimes would be career limiting. But you need those frank, honest conversations if you're going to have an impact. So I think that's a critical piece, not just in what we do, but some of the structural protections that involve that role. And then access. So our policies and doctrine make sure that the JAG always has direct access to the chain of command, so the commander themselves. So it's not like the other advisors where you might have to wait in line to get access. I think access is something that has to be built in. So you really cannot make some of these targeted decisions without having a JAG right there. And that's not the same for all militaries. So again, those are some of our kind of experiences we found have been really beneficial to make sure that the work is effective. And then we also play a piece, of course, in the enforcement. So after the fact, that either our forces have breached or we're investigating an allegation of a war crime through destruction of property, we have part of our plan, our overall plan is to make sure we have domestic kind of criminal legislation to enforce these protocols and treaties, whether it's Geneva Convention or the Hague Conventions, because again, without teeth at the domestic level, it's hard to give power and to make these obligations real. And so we've built those kind of into our domestic legislation, and again, that's not enough. You need not just the legislation, but then you need independent military justice stakeholders who can enforce. So independent prosecutors, independent courts that have legitimacy and constitutional protections to make sure that they are both seen to be effective and legitimate by the public and the international community, because at the end of the day, a lot of the international laws are enforced by the countries themselves. And I think that's something that, I don't just say, and I've worked in the prosecution service for about 7 years after Afghanistan, prosecuting privates all the way up to major generals, and some were involved in kind of, crimes that are committed in war zones. So I know firsthand of the importance of having an effective independent prosecution service, and then having the courts who are also independent. And it's not just me saying that. Our Supreme Court of Canada has actually just recently kind of validated the independence of those courts, because when you have kind of military prosecuting military or military judges kind of at the tribunals, there's an inherent perception of a conflict of interest. And that's why it's important to test those and challenge those things and bring a challenge and let it run through the civilian courts. And then if it's upheld, again, it helps with that public perception and legitimacy, which helps say, we take this seriously, we will enforce these laws, and we set an example, I think, to the international community. But again, all these things are not necessarily obvious, and it's where you need a lot of the, it's not just the treaties, it's not just the law, it's also the other pieces that all come together as part of the overall plan of how we make sure that these concepts are brought into force.
I think that what you mentioned regarding this training and this kind of practical application, I think that we've benefited a lot from being included directly in the NAMES exercises as well. The cultural institutions are there, and it hasn't always been an obvious situation. For the past few years, we've seen that happen. But I think that also goes back to what we've talked about before, that there's in several military conflicts, also in Ukraine, there is purposeful targeting of cultural institutions, of cultural property, and even of just the self-awareness of one's culture. And Frederick, if you could reflect a little bit on how has this come about, and how has culture been reflected in one or another military strategy in the Euro-Atlantic space, and also among our adversaries?
First, I'll just add a short note to what you say. I'm really glad that you're bringing up the question of prosecution and the legal system. And also, again, we can use it figure. We are not talking about things and something, we're talking about somebody. And capacity building in this area during peacetime is also to make sure that we have the right capabilities in place in order to conduct forensic investigations of war crimes in the cultural space. And one of the things that, or one of the lessons that comes out of Ukraine is that they did not have that. But the other thing was not, because really no European country had implemented sufficiently the 54 Hague Convention. There were really no expertise in European countries in order to support them with building right capacities to investigate. So, and that makes it really difficult. And there's just a world of difference between monitoring destructions and doing legal fact-finding, which needs to be conducted in a very systematic manner in order to produce useful material for courts. So that's also, you know, a topic that would be really worth considering when thinking about working with the conventions. And it's not only about, you know, ensuring that each nation have their own capabilities in place. It's also kind of a really critical service that you can lend to friends and allies. And it's a natural place to build international cooperation, because you're going to say not all countries need to have this capacities in-house. Exactly. So this would be a really good area. And I'm also glad that you bring up the question of maps. One thing is no strike lists. Another thing is military maps, because military operation is a mapping exercise. It still is, and it will remain to be about maps. And one of the work streams that they invested in a NATO context was to build capabilities for adding cultural heritage or cultural property on operational maps. Not the no strike list, but just NATO maps that are used also for exercising and just generally establishing overview over the context that you have an interest in, right? So this is again, a didactic exercise. So having this kind of a layer represented on the map enables this cultural domain to become visible to whoever looks on these maps. So it's a very kind of a low cost, high impact, things to do. So instead of having all those inventories that goes into files and eventually everybody hopes to go into no-strike list, but no-strike list is also a difficult thing, to establish, and information has to be verified, and you don't add a file, right?
Yep.
So having operational maps, military maps that are adding this layer is just, recasting the image of the operational environment in a way that brings this domain into view. And then you can work around it afterwards, right? And as for the questions about the most strategic level, about policies and defense and security outlooks, yes, I have been preaching for the last couple of years about the enormous difference that you can see in the way that the Euro-Atlantic countries are dealing with culture and cultural heritage in the national security doctrines compared to what we see on the Russian side. And in short, Russia has just increasing wording and concepts in the doctrines about what we can call the cultural domain, cultural heritage, norms, values, morality, spiritual issues, and so on and so forth. And we hardly have any. It's right that it's bubbling up and that you see more language sneaking in to high-level strategic concepts, but it's just way behind our main adversaries at the moment. And, someone asked me yesterday, why does national security doctrines matter? Because people in the countryside don't read them. But the thing is, it provides a policy hooks for driving forward agendas. Mm-hmm. And again, if there had been a NATO policy on cultural property, it would have been much easier also for the Baltic states to drive forward this kind of cross-sectoral cooperation that is needed to establish the work that needs to be done, right? And the same would have been the case if you, in your national security doctrines or equivalent papers, had a dedicated focus on culture. Mm-hmm. Without that focus, it just gets really difficult to task. It gets difficult to bring people together, to establish communities of interest, because then you have to lobby, you had to do advocacy, you had to convince the different parts that even if we don't have an agreed national policy in this issue, this is very important, you should get into the room. And that's just difficult. Mm. So it's actually, I think, affecting the entire, room of cross-sectoral cooperation, and it is also affecting knowledge production, because if it's not a national security issue, knowledge production environment from those in the public authorities to university and private sector research, they don't deal with the topic, right? Because you don't have access to funding. There's no energy in that room, and there's no hook to link onto. And instead, if you propose these kind of topics, you typically get the answer, nah, this is culture. These are cultural conventions. You should go to the Ministry of Culture. This is not defense and security. So in that way, we are, lagging a bit behind, I would say, not only the Russia, but also other autocratic regime, which has a much deeper tradition for exploiting cultural heritage or the cultural domain for pursuing their own policy objectives. So we have to get up to speed a little bit, I think, on this area in order to be able to counter what we are not only seeing but also feeling in our countries.
And I'm proud to say that in Latvia, in our national security concept, we have included culture, language, and public media in general, and information space as pillars for national resilience. And also in the first draft of next year's budget and the years before, the years after, we have also actually an allocation from the Ministry of Defense's budget towards Ministry of Culture, so that cultural institutions could be better prepared for crises and also to enhance their cybersecurity. So it does go in line with planning and also with budget allocations and with seeing the different domains where this funding is needed for preparedness and resilience. We still have about 15 minutes left, and I still have one question for both of you, but I was wondering if there are any questions here. If it's not a full room, so it's okay. I have questions prepared for the whole time, but perhaps someone has a question. Yeah, go ahead, and they're going to bring you a microphone.
Yeah, thank you. Vitalis Rexton from the Ministry of Culture. My question is, and my previous position, Minister of Defense, was very similar, like your legal advisor to the International Operations Center. One is the approach, which was mentioned in discussion, this focus on international missions, where we have plenty of time, have options to bring experts and evaluate and also withdraw some attacks or change our rules of engagement at that time. But we are living in the total defense nation, which every regional or local battalion commander should take also decisions about warfighting, and they are prioritized to do something. We will bring this difference to this planning, because not all these territorial defense units have these legal advisors who can support them with this additional advice. So what is your advice to the territorial defense nations?
Well, I think that's a good point, and I think it's probably the same in our country as well. Not everyone has access to the same training, and there are different levels of planning and command at the tactical level. Some of these things might be in doctrine or policy, but don't get drilled down. So I think that's kind of why we take steps like producing these documents that are very user-friendly and then widely distributed. So we inject ourselves more into when we get closer to areas in which we will potentially be in crisis. I think it's, again, it comes back to the planning. We have to, even if it's not being done now, we have to then identify those gaps, so have a gap analysis, and find out how, and it's not just legal, right? Legal can be involved and help produce, but it's, we have CIMIC, we have other parts of the military, and then working with partners. So it's not just, I don't think it's just a military responsibility. There are other organizations. I don't know if Blue Shield is very active here, but in other places, there are organizations that will, give training or give presentations to again plant those seeds at the lowest level. I think it has to start there. So we are working with our colleagues, like I said, at GHQ, that are not just for the regular force, but also for the Home Guard and exercising. So we participate in things like NAMES and night NAMES just recently. And again, it lets us know kind of where the gap spaces are. So don't have a perfect solution yet, but I think it starts with, again, education and knowledge, and then seeing where those gaps are and trying to fill them as best as you can at the lowest level.
Right. There, do you have a question? No, just stretching. It's okay. I also wanted to mention that we have actually prepared a list and shared it with the Ministry of Defense to help with the kind of maps and the question that you've talked about before. But I understand that here still we also have to work on how this is made known to everyone who needs to know it. But we've put effort in it, and it's included also in our crisis preparedness plan. So it is because we have been able to learn from best practice examples also elsewhere, and from the work that has been done at the NATO level or by our allies here in Latvia and elsewhere. And I think for the next kind of time period, we need to set clear deliverables for ourselves. And for us here in Latvia, it's certainly to continue with the training and to equip all the managers or owners of cultural property that they know what to do in a situation of crisis, and how to be helpful and a partner also to armed forces or to other services. For example, if there is a flood, then it's the state fire and rescue service, that everyone knows what they're supposed to do, and in that way help each other, not be in the way of each other. So we will continue with training and also with funding and practical assistance, and also this interinstitutional cooperation. But if you would have the chance to set a to-do list for the coming 5 years to ensure that cultural heritage protection becomes effective and an integral part of security policy, what would be the things that you would say, Latvia should do this, the allies, or this and this should be done at the NATO level? What would your top priorities be? we can start with you.
I think we're in a process of getting priorities and policies right on it. So I think a top priority would really be to bring together the closest circle of friends. I would say the Nordic-Baltic circle concept would be really important because you have really good energies, also with regard to working on this topic, and just talk. Bring everybody in the room and try to make this speak from defense and security, and have that language and that rhetoric and those examples and those peoples in the room. Invite stakeholders from NATO to present the work that is being done, and find out how NATO organizations, people already working on it in those contexts, would be able to support a Nordic-Baltic process in order to get that language and that flag on the process. I think that would be very important, because the more you strengthen the agenda, the easier it will also be to mobilize voluntary work in this area. And that's also a very critical factor, because what you want to do, you want to have, of course, readiness and right capabilities in relevant branches of defense and security organizations, but you also need to have the cultural sector on board, and it needs to be within already existing budgets, and you need to be able to mobilize museums directors, civil defense branches around a relatively defined discourse agenda. So in that way, I really think that building a kind of an international policy, regional policy agenda around this would provide a much better hook for working across all the sectors, Latvian politics and beyond, and find the common language and find the common priorities, and use whatever budgets that are available in order to push this together as a community.
I think the Nordic-Baltic cooperation aspect is super important, and actually we have already last year concluded kind of a commitment to enhance this cooperation, and this year in the Nordic-Baltic ministers meeting in Finland, we dedicated a whole day to this, also learning from the Ukrainian experience. And I know that also currently the Danish presidency in the European Union, this is in the realm of culture, one of their priorities as well. And we're going to be talking about it at the informal ministers meeting in Copenhagen in just a couple of weeks. It's there, but I think also for us it's important to move beyond the talk and the commitment, and also use this partnership and this kind of coalition of the like-minded states to really reflect on this also, for example, in the next multi-annual financial framework of the European Union, that we do take this dimension into account when allocating resources also to the cultural sector.
And that's there's so much energy in the room at the moment to get the rise. And I think one advice is also to be more brave on the language and speak more up, instead of like placing culture, at the margins of resilience, which is also a very loose concept. This is about borders, right?
Yeah.
So this is about the constitution of the nations. It's absolutely at the core of what we speak about when we speak about defense and security. And this is where the discourse should be as well. Of course, it's important to address Article 3 issues and resilience and preparedness and voluntary cooperation, but it's more than this. So that would also be my advice. I mean, to strengthen and use a somewhat harder language to frame it, even if it can be difficult to navigate this, namely in the cultural sector, I think. Yeah.
And this is where we learn from the military and the armed forces, I guess. This is where the kind of getting on the same level of vocabulary would be helpful, also to bring some of the kind of wording over to the culture sector. What would your kind of recommendation for the coming 5 years be?
It's I think even with the strongest laws, an enemy who's committed and motivated to attacking culture, the laws will not really stop them. So it's kind of too late when the bullets start flying. The advice really is on the mitigation and preparation to, again, build those partnerships so you can safeguard, have a plan to potentially move what can be moved, using the assistance of, the military here that might have those tools, logistics to assist in that, or at least have a plan to know when we will do things, because we're very good at planning, but we have to make sure that it's raised to a certain level of importance so that it gets a priority in the military plans. And I think that's, like I said, a lot of it's education. So I'd like to see more education on the military side, to have it's very important, I think, for our military commanders who will be kind of commanding armed forces in this area to go and explore these sites personally, to go to the Baltics, to see this. It's one thing to see it on a map as an icon, but it's another thing to stand in some of these buildings and learn the history, because that's really what the fight is about. It's about protecting the identity, the culture, the heritage of the people from those who are motivated to destroying it. And I think that's not just a local problem; that's a humanity problem. And so I think it's not just NATO-led. I think each country has to amplify and develop their own doctrines so that they train before they get here. They train. They already bring these concepts with them. We're here as the framework nation and a multinational brigade, leading 12 other nations. And sometimes it's hard just to know what people's ethos, values, ethics are, and then selling them on something that they haven't really implemented in their own nations is kind of you're already behind the 8 ball. So that's a little too late. So I think I'd like to, again, just make sure that, again, the knowledge education, the emphasis on why this is important, and not just because it's like you'll get prosecuted for it, which could be true, but there are bigger motivations that can be implemented through doctrine and training on the military side. And then second, I think it's just, like I said, even for legal advisors, there are a lot of rules and laws in the law of armed conflict that we're responsible for, training and advising on. And I think involving us in more international workshops, conferences, so we know what is the common best practices, what are the experts saying in these areas, interacting with culture, which we're good at MOD and working with defense, but not always thinking about engaging with other departments and other government or agencies. So I think for us, I'd like to see more networking, and I think that will happen as we spend a longer time in this area. But again, a lot of it's preparation on my side.
Well, I guess part of it is why we're here, right? In the security conference format, where sometimes this also doesn't seem like the topic to include, but as soon as we begin the conversation, we realize the importance of it. And obviously, as you said, why we're all doing this is to protect our countries, protect our people, to protect our communities, and then building communities is what we need to do to be able to better respond to any kind of challenge. And I'm very thankful for your participation here today, and also for the engagement of your colleagues and you yesterday with cultural institutions, because this is how I think we build the mutual understanding, but also I think reassert the importance of every single element of our societal resilience. And if there is, I don't think there is any question why we should invest in culture. I think we all are well aware that that is investing in our people, in our self-awareness, in our resilience, and not necessarily in buildings and in infrastructure. That is important as well, but the main rationale behind it is so that we are stronger together and more self-aware and proud, and then also will be able to better face any types of crisis that come our way. So I want to thank very much Colonel Walsh from the Canadian Armed Forces and Dr. Frederick Rosen for being here with me today. And thank you also to the organizers of the conference and my team for putting this together. Thank you so much.